You don't think that art exists.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the relationship, like art making as we know it had in a lot of different areas of the world and like historically, it was not about this whole art for art's sake, like I'm expressing myself. It was very much like a devotional practice. It was very real, it was very tangible. And if you look at the history of like quote unquote modern art, you get this sort of exaltation as we start to get more industrial and as we start to develop capitalism more. You start to have professional artists in the sense that anyone else would be a professional, and it sort of reaches its apex in the mid 1800s. Like, you know, photography happens, we get into abstraction. I love all of those kind of works, but the way that we approach it is in this very professionalized dividing lens. To say that there are people who are artists and non-artists, that sort of is almost analogous to, okay, so these people are creative and these people are not. I worked in an art supply store. Someone would be an aspirant wanting to be someone who can draw or someone who can paint, but they're always saying, well, I can't do it like this, I'm not this good. And you have the art market now as well that is very judgmental on certain standards and whatnot. All
Mm.
that's doing, as far as I'm concerned, is telling people that they aren't able to create because they can't match a certain professionalized standard that we've come up with, that they're invalid in their innate human creativity. All human beings are creative beings. That's part of being human. Well, if you don't go to art school and if you don't have painting technique, you're not a real artist. I've met so many artists who have this sort of superiority complex to everyone around them. Well, we're artists. It's our job to express. If other people could see the world as artists do, oh my. Bullshit. The people who don't have the creative impulse is usually because it was bred out of them or, you know, stripped from them, because children draw naturally. People create naturally.
The high school I went, it didn't really matter that we were like considered to be young. Our ideas were valid. It was my visual art teacher. But as soon as I got that, I can actually do more than what the expectation of me is. It
Yeah.
helped me in my math. It helped me in my English. The notion that I don't have to be at this level.
Like Aleister Crowley will talk a bit about artists almost having like a leg up sometimes on magicians, in a sense,
In
in the
what sense?
sense that these are people who are creating. They're people who are creating uninhibited and have the confidence to do so, compared to most people who have sort of been suppressed in their creative instincts. When you do these sort of practices of visualizations and creative thinking practices, it does have a neurological effect on you as well. And it opens up other aspects of your life, as you were saying. You know, I found that for myself as well. Once I really freed myself to let my mind kind of do its thing and let my instincts take over, I started being able to do more things as well. Like I could understand more things. My brain wasn't so compartmentalized. Things stopped becoming separate from each other and all became part of the same continuum.
What about the highly premeditated piece that isn't necessarily instinctual, like you're talking about?
Oh, I mean, that still is, I would still say that those have some instinctual basis. Even a child can make a premeditated piece. It's not all just doodling, right?
Mm.
Not everything is automatic. Like there's those artworks that were executed as like community pieces or like these sort of religious pieces and whatnot that held like metaphysical value for the people who would experience them. Those
Mm.
were definitely planned.
Yeah.
It's just this sort of, we've turned art into a worship of a supremely creative individual now, as opposed to something that's based for community, that's based for experience. You know, now it's all commodification. It's all, a lot of the time we're commodifying our concepts too.
What you've said about individualism is really important because the art is like a reflection of the neoliberalist and
Oh yeah.
capitalist ideals, the values of this highly individualism. And individualism is like what we've said about consciousness in itself. It cuts us off
Mm-hmm.
from the connection between you and me, you know, like where I and sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, no, that's a great point. Thinking about the idea of like a certain type of mass culture that we now have,
Mm.
whereas beforehand there was a lot of smaller cultures, more community-based cultures, more like location-based cultures, and those would have their own forms of art, their own forms of music, their own forms of creativity that were unique to them. when you have mass culture happening, it's almost as if you're telling everyone, no, this is what you like, this is what's good. So when I look at the question of what is and what isn't valuable, it's super arbitrary.
Mm.
And you can look no further than to think that one of the biggest art movements of our, whatever, 70 years, like abstract expressionism, it was literally pushed as a reaction to socialist realism in the 50s, because AbX exalts the individual. It's an entirely individualistic, masculine dominated, I'm expressing my inner soul because I'm an American. See that like our art canon is influenced by a political agenda half the time, and one that isn't really positive.
Is it possible to actually do anything? Because I can judge capitalism all I want and I still participate in it, right?
Oh yeah.
Is it possible? Is it possible to do something that steps, or artwork that steps outside of this paradigm of the capitalist world that we live in?
If you're just making art as a community cultural focus, you're making it for something that's meaningful to you and you're encouraging others to explore their abilities in that, then I think you're getting close. The forces around me have dictated that I must do other things in my week in order to justify my reason to live. And painting is not one of those things. Being able to harness your own creativity lets you have control over your conscious experience of your life. I'll use the words that we use now. When you live as an artist, you can creatively interact with your surroundings, creatively interact with your emotions, creatively interact with every experience you have if you so choose. If you are predisposed to allowing your creativity to go, you can really have a lot of fun with your mind. You know, you can have a lot of fun with the way you experience the world. You can have a lot of fun with other people creating new things together. But when you don't believe you have those capacities, and when you believe that there's somebody else who's more qualified than you to do it, and you're trained from birth to submit, you see people who have these cultural views now that have been defined for them. Most people's thoughts going through the day, they didn't come up with themselves. You know, you read it in a newspaper, okay, that person's smarter than me, so therefore they're right. Oh, I see this artwork, that's a real artist, therefore I should like that. Oh, that's a good television show made by people with degrees or people who are in the industry, therefore that means it's good. You know, we're all sort of taught slowly our whole lives what the barriers are, what the boundaries are, and what the expectations are without us even knowing it.